current COVID quarantine status. So as Marianne said, according to the Jewish calendar, the 29 days of Elul start August 21st, which is tomorrow. And they continue until the Feast of Trumpets, which begins on September 18th. And then come the 10 days of awe, when it's believed by many that the gates of heaven are uniquely open. The season ends with the Day of Atonement, which is September 27th. And as the High Holy Days come closer, we're sort of obligated to perform a Cheshbon HaNefesh, so a personal accounting of our soul, to prepare ourselves for these High Holy Days. Historically, the Cheshbon HaNefesh has beginnings in Judaism, tracing back to Rabbi, I'm going to massacre the name here, Menachem Mendel Leffin of Satanov, who lived from 1749 to 1826. And he kept a journal to identify and document and cultivate attributes of teshuvah in himself. Cheshbon HaNefesh has also been described by many as an effort to sort of train yourself in the qualities of humility and justice and giving back. So how do we define the term accounting? It can be defined financially as to summarize, analyze, and report financial transactions to oversight agencies. But how do we apply that definition to Judaism? We look at our behavior, and then we summarize, analyze, and report our behavioral transactions to the oversight agencies. But what is the oversight agency? Some people believe it's God. Some people believe it's your conscience. Some people believe it's your soul. Judaism believes that the soul was given by God to Adam, as mentioned in Genesis. Quote, then the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul, end quote. So now it brings us to our first activity. I want you all to think about what the word soul means to you. And in 2 to 3 words, please put your definition of the word soul into the chat box. And then we're going to take a minute or two to read and process what other people have written in the chat box.
What does it mean, Drew? Bottom of my foot.
Oh. Keep thinking, start writing. The essence of a person from Pete and Susie. Okay, awesome, thank you. Those are great. Very nice, very nice. I hear typing, so more stuff. Light, goodness, truth. Okay, awesome. Very good. Connection to God. Awesome. That's great. Those are wonderful, wonderful definitions of the word soul. Awesome. Excellent. Okay, I think we have some great definitions. Does anybody else want to put anything else in there? I'm going to go on to the next part. And we need to sort of think about what the personal accounting entails in the traditional Jewish sense. So I'm going to give you a little historical perspective of what the true Cheshbon HaNefesh really entails, and then we can look at how we're going to modify that for these days. So Rabbi Menachem Mendel Leffin published a book in the Ukraine in 1812 called Cheshbon HaNefesh, and it provides a practical step-by-step method of introspection and self-understanding that some feel like is a self-help manual. So traditionally, the participant composes a list of 13 qualities that are observed within that person's self. So remember, don't worry, we're not going to look at 13 today. We're only going to do one. The traits that belong on your list are aspects of your inner life that cause you grief in one way or another. So maybe you're already aware that you might be a little selfish or greedy, or you tend to exaggerate, or you anger quickly, or you're arrogant, or you feel entitled sometimes, or lazy, or rambunctious. And I think one thing that I feel like I need to work on is I feel like I have the tendency to allow others to walk all over me. Terry always tells me I'm too nice. So that's my thing I'm going to be working on. But any quality that could benefit from positive change belongs on your list. So some traits will leap into your face because you're very aware of them, and others you might need to sort of dig a little deeper in introspection to find out what they are. Okay, so at this time, we're going to do activity number 2. And so I'd like you to think about a 2 to 3 word phrase that represents a quality in you that you would like to actively work to change. And you can write that in the chat box, but if you're uncomfortable with that, then you can just write it on a piece of paper. And then I want to take a little bit of time to read and process responses. Procrastination. Okay, Renee, awesome. I do that too. I didn't even think about that one.
Hear you typing.
You guys are coming up with some really good things. Very good. Awesome. I love how people are participating in this. That makes me feel really good that you're participating in it. Okay, so let's keep these traits in mind that you've either written in the chat box or written on paper. And once you have identified the trait, according to Cheshbon HaNefesh, what you need to do is provide yourself with a simple phrase or a mantra that captures that quality and how you're going to make yourself better with that quality. So I'm going to give you some examples from what Rabbi Leffen gave us in his book, Cheshbon HaNefesh. So if people are not treating people with equanimity, he says, rise above the events that are inconsequential, both bad and good, for they are not worth disturbing my peace of mind. Mm-hmm. So what that means these days is like, don't sweat the small stuff. For people that are too quick to decide without listening to all of the perspectives, Rabbi Leffen says, all of your acts should be preceded by deliberation. And then when you have reached a decision, act without delay. So for righteousness and entitlement, Rabbi Leffen goes to the Talmud and says, what is hateful to you, do not do for your neighbor. And my mantra could be to speak out a little bit more and not let people walk all over me. It's my mantra. Now, in the traditional settings where people participate in the entire Cheshbon HaNefesh ritual, they identify 13 qualities and 13 different phrases or mantras, and they work on one particular quality per week for 13 weeks, and then they keep a journal of that, and they write in the journal every morning and every night, and they review the mantra that they have been going over during that day, that they keep chanting and repeating it all day long. And then at bedtime, they look backwards to see if any of the actions they did that day reveal the presence of that quality being worked on. So like, how many people did I let walk all over me today? How many people did I not say, no, I can't do that to? So that's an example. But once you've recorded all of your thoughts and experiences related to that quality, the next week you take another quality and you go in this 13-week period reviewing all of them, and then over a year you do all of the qualities 4 different times, and at the end of the year before the next Cheshbon HaNefesh, you can look back in the book that you have written about all the qualities that you wanted to improve and see where you are and how far you've come. Okay, so we're just doing one trait, one mantra right now. So at this time, I would like you all to think about the trait that you put in the chat box or that you wrote on paper, and think about what your mantra might be. And you can write it in the chat box, or if you're uncomfortable with that, please write it on paper. And then we'll take a couple of minutes to just read and process the responses. Nice.
Oh.
Hey, you guys are coming up with some really good mantras. Awesome. Awesome. Wow, those are great. Okay, I don't see anybody else typing anything else in. So we're going to move on to the 4th part of this, which is the 4th and final part. And the question there is, how do we translate the historic and traditional perspective into our modern COVID times? And we do it through tashlik and teshuvah. So tashlik comes from the Hebrew word meaning to cast, and it refers to the intent of casting away our sins. And it's an ancient Jewish custom common to both Ashkenazi and Sephardi Jews. And it started around the 13th century and became very widespread. As it became more widespread, a lot of the rabbis of the time were fearful that people would turn to believing more in tashlik than to teshuvah. And so the rabbis sort of were worried that the people would not believe that teshuvah had the power to change their lives, but only tashlik did. So a lot of the rabbis were also not in favor of tossing breadcrumbs representing your sins into the water. And there was also a tradition of shaking your tzitzit to loosen the evil clinging to your tzitzit. Those were not favored by rabbis at the time as well. But in today's world, tossing breadcrumbs into the water is damaging both to the waterfowl and to the environment. So we are, at this time, still discouraging it. So let's rethink what we can do for tashlik and teshuvah. Tashlik is usually performed on the first day of Rosh Hashanah. If the first day of Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, then it can be done the second day of Rosh Hashanah. But it can also be performed anytime throughout the 10 days of repentance and even until the last day of Sukkot, except on Shabbat. Now, because this year's High Holy Days at Temple Beth Israel will be electronic, we will also be doing a very different kind of tashlik. The introspection of this season will lead us to an inner evaluation of our lives and what we can do better. So through this introspection, through this Cheshbon HaNefesh process, we can develop a factual and accurate picture of our inner lives, our inner selves, as it shapes our thoughts and our words and our deeds. Cheshbon HaNefesh is not for us to beat ourselves up. Jewish tradition says that there is no such thing as a worthless human being. Each human being has infinite, unmeasurable worth. So we're not here to beat ourselves up. We're not looking at our worth as individuals, but we're looking at the worth of our behavior as individuals, as part of a community. So consider, how can you turn your thoughts into positive deeds? This year, as we start the month of Elul tomorrow, considering Cheshbon HaNefesh and adding teshuvah to our tashlik, we need to think about where we can go from here. Rabbi Rick will be sending out tashlik instructions, so we will all be doing our own individual or family accounting. But I challenge you to look at things in a more positive and community-focused aspect. So instead of chiding yourself and saying, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? Focus on, what can I do better? And instead of, who do I apologize to? Ask yourself, who can I reach out to? Focus on tikkun olam, and in what ways can you make the world a better place? So I want you to think about your teshuvah for tashlik, your tikkun olam for the season. So for example, I've been working with a very multicultural group since March, sewing fabric masks. Now, initially, all these masks were given to healthcare providers who didn't have personal protective equipment while working in the hospitals, and their families. However, now all our focus has changed to the farm workers in Fresno County. They are the big hotspot for COVID-19. And we recently have given them a large amount of masks, both fabric and, courtesy of the Jewish Federation, have given them also some regular face masks. This group has made and distributed about almost 10,000 face masks, fabric face masks, to different agencies in need. Another teshuvah activity is donating to the food bank twice a month since the pandemic and quarantine began. So for activity number 4, what I would like you guys to think about is your teshuvah for tashlik, your tikkun olam. Put an example of what you feel like you can do to make the world a better place in the chat box, and then review and process the responses. All of the comments will be artistically brought together and hopefully distributed to congregational members during the High Holy Day season as a reminder that teshuvah, tashlik, and tikkun olam should come together this year to positively impact the world. So let's see what your teshuvah is going to be here. Put it in the chat box. Hey, that's an awesome teshuvah. Awesome. That's great. We're starting to get some teshuvah. Great. Awesome. Excuse me. Very nice. You guys are coming up with some really awesome teshuvah. Awesome. I'm not seeing any new things pop up here. So I just want to thank everybody for their time and listening to this process of Cheshbon HaNefesh. And I hope you enjoyed the participative experience. And I'm very open to questions or comments. That's it.
Roberta, I just want to say this was wonderful. Really wonderful. Thank you so much.
Lisa, I can't hear you.
Oh, wait a minute.
Let me try this way.
Oh, that's way better. Okay.
Can you hear me? All right. I wanted to thank you. I think this was absolutely wonderful. And I've always believed that Yom Kippur around there, the cleansing of the soul and really looking inside and looking to see who you were and what changes you have to make was one of the most important things we do. And I turned in today not knowing, what it was about, but wanting to hear you. And I thank you from the bottom of my soul.
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Those are sweet words. Thank you.
Very
It
nice.
means a lot. Okay, I guess, Marianne, who's on next week? Who's on next week?
Next week is Lisa Morse. And Gianna, do we have a title?
Yes, it's advertising in a time of COVID, or in the time of COVID.
Okay. So, but we have about a half hour. If there are other issues, anybody kind of tuning in to the allocation of CARES Act monies here in Fresno or in the county? Somebody, I'll just throw that out there. Somebody made a comment about registering voters. What does voter registration look like in the time of COVID? Other questions? I'm just off the top of my head, or
Marianne, what was
in private.
Marianne, what was the first thing you said? They're doing what?
I'm just, there's been a lot of discussion this week about the allocation of CARES Act funds in Fresno. An additional allocation was received by the city. Been conversation that the county has been quite a bit less open with how their money is being spent. The city has, agreed to establish new healthcare facilities, clinics in the Southwest and Southeast. They've set up new funding again for small businesses with the new allocation of money. But it's been quite a topic locally.
Interesting. I think voting, getting out the vote is one of our primary issues today. And I know I've been writing letters. I started with the Swing Left, but that was in person. And there's an organization called Vote Forward. And you can go online and pick out how many letters you want to write. They actually have a form. You just have to put in the name, you have to address the envelope, and then put a little sentence or two about why you think voting is important. And these are all going to go out. They're trying to determine what the correct date is. They're watching all the data and talking to different states and post offices. And it's really exhorting basically Democrats, who are registered but don't always go out to vote, to get out and vote. And to me, this is one of our critical issues, among other big critical issues, but this is an immediate critical issue. So I think it's important one way or the other to talk to friends, talk to people, just get them out to vote this year.
It's an interesting question. I mean, from doing a lot of talking to young voters come from families who vote.
Mm-hmm.
It's a generational thing, and difficult. I think it's difficult for some people to really understand how their vote ultimately works, how change happens.
You know, again, what really struck me when John Lewis said, the most powerful nonviolent tool or weapon we have is the vote. And I may be an idealist, but I believe that people have power if they use it. And that means getting out to vote and doing what needs to be done to bring about change. And I think it's more from a lack of apathy or a feeling of what difference will it make. Well, you know what? In some districts, it makes a huge difference. Not a lot of votes can make a huge difference in turning an election. So I'm one who believes in the power of the people. I don't think we use it, but I think we have it.
It'd be nice if everyone understood that apathy is a far greater change agent than voting.
I agree, Mike. I agree. Yeah. In other words, it's apathy, not action.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Sadly, I agree.
Sometimes people don't realize the power that local elected officials wield over us. They don't realize the kinds of decisions that really make a substantive difference in what our lives are like. And so they kind of discount the value of voting for or against them.
Well, they truly believe their vote doesn't make a difference. I have family and friends, and they don't believe it makes a difference. So they don't vote. Or they vote for the wrong person.
The way we want.
So.
Right.
Other issues? Anybody doing anything particularly unusual in preparation for the high holidays?
Marianne, I have a question.
I'm ready.
Since the Women's League of Voters is very involved in the process at election time, could you describe what's going to be going on as far as getting ballots in and counting them and getting results out in time? I think you probably know a lot about this.
In Fresno County, the ballots will be sent out on October 5th. That's Monday, October 5th. They're traditionally sent out 30 days ahead of time, but that's a Saturday. This year, the law has changed such that once the ballots are sent out, they can be counted. So once they've been sent out and returned, the counting can begin immediately. And so in the past, the counting could only begin 10 days before Election Day. But in the past year, you may realize Fresno County became one of the counties in California that used Voters' Choice Act funds in order to change the way we vote. 100% of the registered voters receive a vote by mail ballot. We have, I think, around 55 vote centers throughout the county rather than, I think there were 257 precincts in the past. And any vote center is able to create the ballot that's just right for your address. In the last election in March, about 90%, I believe 95% of the votes were received by mail. They were not cast in the vote center. With the Voters' Choice Act, the county was able to buy new equipment for a couple of parts of the processing of ballots. To begin with, when a vote by mail ballot is received, it has a signature on the outside, your signature. And that is mechanically compared to the signature on your registration card. With the new equipment, about 65% of those are matched by computer. Those that don't match immediately are viewed on screen very quickly by an operator. So that greatly speeded up the process for qualifying ballots. Once the ballot is open, the new ballot tabulating equipment now can determine whether or not you've written in a candidate, whether you voted more than once, whether you've, I don't know, just many of the things that had to manually be duplicated. Ballots, there was a lot of ballot duplication that had to happen with our previous system, but now those are handled by the system, mechanically by the system. So the whole system is so much faster. In past elections, those of us that were involved with unfolding and processing the ballots struggled to get all of the ballots processed before Election Day. On Election Day itself in our county, there is no ballot processing or counting. The numbers that you hear at 8 o'clock at the end of Election Day are the result of all the ballots that have been opened and tabulated up until the day before 8 o'clock or whenever the mail arrived on the day before the election. Beginning, and then there's sort of a process. I think the votes are reported maybe that night at 8 o'clock, and then they're reported maybe a day or so later, and then it gets a little bit less frequent. And I think the county has 30 days to verify to complete and verify the vote. But the process is very, very, very much speeded up with new equipment. And I believe that there are 9 counties in California that there may be more. There were 5 originally. We were not in the original 5. And then another slug of counties went to the Voters' Choice Act process, which allowed them to access money from the state, upgrade their equipment and stuff. And some counties like Los Angeles, it just was overwhelming. New equipment or not, they were just really, really struggled to deal with vote by mail. So we'll see what happens.
Marianne, do you see any change or know of any changes from the past when we did this manual opening of each ballot and then scanning it? What part is going to be eliminated on the human element part? Do you know of any changes?
Very much faster because, as I said, the duplication of ballots. And remember that when you, in the old days, if you lived, say, at Fruit and Shaw, but you voted out in Clovis, you could definitely vote there, but you voted provisionally because the ballot that you received at a precinct in Clovis didn't have all of the candidates that you were eligible to vote for. So that ballot that you voted out in Clovis had to be transferred to the correct ballot for your address at Fruit and Shaw. And what that meant was that you didn't have a vote for, say, a city council person or a school board member for your particular neighborhood. Yes, you were able to vote for senators or statewide office or ballot measures at a different precinct. But that whole process now doesn't happen because at a vote center, a ballot can be created for exactly your precinct. Or you can walk in with the ballot you received by mail, which is the one that's correct for your voting precinct. So that's
there's more spreading out of people at the warehouse.
Pardon me?
More spreading out of the people at the warehouse.
The whole process is so much faster. Now we had, in the last election in March, we had no trouble, in a few hours a day, just opening the ballots and preparing them for tabulation because there was no duplication or processing required.
So that
One of
means
the fun parts about opening the ballots was chatting with people who were there, but I assume it would be so spread out that
They'll have to yell.
Yeah, too bad.
does that mean you're not going to need, you'll need very few volunteers based on what you're saying?
No, I don't think that's true. I just think that the hours will be less.
Oh, okay.
Marianne, I have a question. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, last time we voted, we lived near West and Herndon, And at the Walgreens, there was a white box.
Yeah,
Looked
ballot
like
box.
nobody could steal it.
Right.
Right, and you could leave your ballot there, which I did. And that seemed like a new option. Will that be available this year?
Oh yeah, they've increased it. In fact, I think that, I don't know the numbers right off because I haven't been attending those meetings, but the ballot boxes were quite popular, much more so than the actual vote centers. Those ballot boxes weigh about 800 pounds. They're bolted to the ground. And they have actually a time thing, kind of like sort of reminds me of the way a bank would operate. So the access to the slot can be controlled sort of on a timer, so you can't really, insert your ballot after 8 o'clock on election day or whatever. So, but yeah, that was a really, that was a big improvement. And then there was a year's worth of meetings to decide where those ballot boxes were placed in Fresno County. And then an analysis was done after the election to see which were used and which were not used as much. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay, well, that's good to know. Progress. Thanks.
Instead of the
Instead of
mail,
now.
maybe.
So really, everybody, I think that voting is one of the most important Cheshbon HaNefesh things we can do. So let's see if we can get out the vote, make sure that we all think about how to make things better, getting everybody health care, make the planet a better place, deal with food insecurity, racial injustice, and use our Cheshbon HaNefesh time to make sure that we are the change that we want to see in the world.
Very good.
Thank you.
I see Karen has a raised hand.
What's up, Karen?
Unmute yourself.
It was something I was curious about for the voting. I don't know if Marianne knows, how many days before election day is the voting place open if you want to bring in the ballot instead of mailing it?
In the past, when the vote centers were set up in March, the state mandated that a certain amount had to be open for 10 days and the rest for 4 days. But based on the utilization of them during the March election, the vote centers will only be open for 4 days. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Okay, thank you.
I was asked a question on how this connects to Cheshbon HaNefesh before I saw Roberta's reply, which I think is good and nice. In Israel, when you want your check in the restaurant, you ask for the Cheshbon, the settling up of the account. So to speak, and settling up spiritually is what one does during this time leading into the high holidays. I know I'm just kind of repeating what Roberta has already said very well. One of the things that I always try to keep in mind is, and I've got two people to think about for it now. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who came out of deep spiritual roots, felt that he could not read Torah without it leading to action. So part of the way that he lived out his cheshbon was to march for civil rights, for example. And at the moment, as we're talking about, getting out the vote is an important part of civil rights. The other thing that is extremely important right now, especially here in California, is making sure people are connected to the census, that they filled out and done the census. It's another very important part of our representation. But the other person who I think is equally important and certainly as powerful in this representation of how you take your religious tradition and translate it into, he wouldn't have necessarily called it cheshbon, but into your spirituality turning into your marching footsteps, it was certainly John Lewis. Of course, Dr. Martin Luther King, but we're thinking very much about John Lewis these days, and the importance of voting, and how it is a civic responsibility, and how it represents our values. I will not stand up and tell you how to vote on something, but I will tell you to vote. And you can look back in Moment Magazine's old issues where you'll find the rabbis across the board talking about Judaism's value on voting. And of course, Reform Judaism's representative in that is our own Rabbi Laura. So echoing what Roberta has said, just to further emphasize, is that, you know, through our texts, through our tradition, it has a whole lot to say about interacting with human beings and the entire world of creation around us. And we often have a chance to exhibit those values through the choices we make at the ballot box. So we encourage people to not only contemplate their lives in prayer, but represent those lives in civic engagement. Okay, I'm done.
I'm just putting up a quote from Rabbi Tarfon about who's Rabbi Laura's favorite rabbi, I guess, next to Rabbi Rick, that we're not obligated to complete the work, but we are obligated to participate in it. And that is a big part of the Cheshbon HaNefesh. Okay, so I guess thank you again, all of you, for your time, and we can sign off, and hope to see everybody at Shabbat services Friday night.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roberta.
Thank you very much.
Tisch is at 5:30, Gianna?
Oh, shoot.
Next week.
Thank you, Roberta.
Sorry.
Thank you, Roberta.
I can't remember that conversation.
Think so. I'm not sure.
I would imagine, given her work schedule, but
You're going to send something out, won't you, Gianna? You'll send something.
looks like I better, and I better send it out right. I honestly did not bring that up in our conversation. So I have her that she's going to do it, and I have what her topic is, and I don't have the time. So thank you so much, Marianne, for pointing that out. And everybody, maybe I'll know today for today's email, but of course I'll certainly know by next Wednesday, but I'll work on that right now.
And just preview, Mark, on September 3rd, Mark Lasher will be viewing a film, really a documentary, 15-minute documentary that was created by a fine arts graduate student about the clinic that he runs, and further an update with him talking about his work. Those of you who don't know Mark, he converted an old school bus into a free clinic, which arrives at Roding Park every Saturday at 1 o'clock to serve anyone who needs medical care free of charge. And I believe there's an associated needle exchange as well there. And then September 10th, I think Gary, are you here? Oops, he's already getting ready. Gary is going to talk to us about amateur radio, something, I don't know, personally, I don't know anything about. So, but thanks again, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Roberta, for a great job, an interesting topic, and getting us started on our high holiday journey. So thank you all.
It was kind of fun to put together. So you guys take care, everybody be safe, okay?
Talk to you soon.
Oh, 12 o'clock next week. I have an answer.
12 o'clock, great. See you then.
Okay.